if you've been following goings-on the channel recently, you'll be aware that one of the games that I've started looking into quite extensively is Battletech. Now, I'm absolutely in love with the game, I like everything about it, and I did a video all about that, asking if the grass is greener coming across from 40k. But one of the things that I noticed that really stood out to me is that the community just, well, hits different. I spent a fair bit of time since getting into Battletech hanging out in the Battletech subreddit, and the place just really intrigued me about how warm and welcoming and friendly it was, how encouraging they were. It was just such a nice environment. So you can imagine how cool I thought it was when the moderator of that very subreddit reached out to me in the comments of that video and said, "Hey, do you want to do something?" And what better way to do that than sit down and chat to the guys? So we kind of had a bit of back and forth about it, and what we ended up settling on was a little kind of cross interview where I could introduce myself to the Battletech community through Insaniac's questions, and Insaniac could introduce the Battletech community to my audience through my questions. And that's what we're going to get into now. So enjoy! Okay, Insaniac, so welcome to the channel. I was going to say welcome to the show then, but this isn't a thing that we normally do. It's a bit of a first. So, I guess the best place to start is if maybe you can introduce yourself to my audience, because that's probably a lot of the people that will be watching it will be my existing audience. Maybe you know who you are, what your involvement in Battletech is, how long you've been involved, that kind of thing.
Sure. My Battletech story is kind of funny. I've only been playing the board game since, about 2014 or so. But okay. I got into the game during the 80s with Crescent Hawk's Inception, a really old DOS-based game.
Wow.
And much later in life, I realized that it was a board game, and I got hooked into it, and I've been playing it ever since. I became the moderator of the Battletech subreddit, and I've been lucky enough to beta test some Battletech products and help share my love with other people.
Amazing. So you've been pretty deeply involved for a fair while now. I suppose that there's not really a lot of point in wasting any time. We know why we're here. We know what we're here to do. So we should probably start asking each other some questions. We've got show notes. I won't lie to the audience about that. We've got show notes because we didn't want to trip each other up with any weird questions that we might not know the answer to, and nobody wants to watch a video of two blokes stumbling and mumbling. So I think I'm going to start with my first one because my first one is in the list, and we'll just go through the list in order, shall we?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, wicked. So my first question for you was, when and why did you decide to get involved with specifically the Battletech subreddit?
So that'd be about 2 years ago. The tabletop Kickstarter by Catalyst Games Lab was in full swing, and I don't know the other moderator's full story, but I know he hasn't been able to be as active as he wanted. And at some point, I just reached out and was like, "Hey, I can help pin stuff and manage organizational data and all of that kind of fun stuff." And he gave me full privileges, and I've been running the show ever since.
So is it basically just you that does it then at this point?
Yeah. If he's doing anything, I'm not aware of it. I'll send him a message every once in a while, but
sure.
we don't talk much.
So it is pretty much your show then. That's crazy because it's a pretty big subreddit.
Yeah, but the subreddit's so calm, and there's not a whole lot to do.
For sure. Okay, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about you. I know you're a traditional painter before painting minis, so how long have you been painting, and then how long have you been painting minis for?
So this is an interesting question. It has come up before, but I don't think I've ever answered it on YouTube. So it's a good one. I didn't actually start with traditional painting. Traditional painting is where I had my first success, but it was mini painting that started it all off for me. I think it was probably around 1991 at a guess. So I would have been about 6 years old, and my eldest brother Steve, took me into a Games Workshop store in London. A staffer there let him sort of sit down with me and teach me how to paint a Space Marine, and at the time I believe it was still RTB01 original Beaky Marines. And and we sat and we painted that, and I kind of got hooked on miniature painting. Through secondary school, had a Space Marine army and an Eldar army, and so honed my miniature painting skills. Well, I suppose it's what you'd call high school. And that was kind of, when I first started taking commissions, as it were, was for schoolmates when I was a teenager. And it wasn't, commissions in the sense that it's literally my business now. But it was, I'll paint this box of Marines for you if you buy me that box of Marines. And, schoolmates would do it, and that's how it would go. But then, as with all things in life, miniature painting is a little bit cyclical for me, or it has been in the past at least. And so I was in and out a lot, and I got out of it probably somewhere around 5th or 6th edition, which I would guess is like the early 2000s, if memory's sort of sitting in place correctly. That's 5th or 6th edition of 40k, sorry. And then around 2010 got into traditional painting. And there's a guy from Pennsylvania called Brandon Brown, incredible artist. He taught me a hell of a lot. Sort of took me under his wing and mentored me, and gave me some really good, solid fundamentals in traditional painting, which I, for a time, was kind of doing as a career. That was what I was doing for a living. But mini painting, it's always been there as a love, and so probably sort of 3 or 4 years ago now I got back in, and this time I don't seem to be drifting away from it. I think just because there's so much more to do now, there's hundreds of games to choose from and so many different miniatures to choose from now, I don't seem to be drifting away anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a weird story because people who know me through this YouTube obviously think of me as a mini painter. People who know me prior to YouTube think of me as a traditional painter. And it's actually kind of both of those are true, but neither of those are true at the same time.
Yeah, I was just curious, what kind of stuff did you paint traditionally?
So what I used to do was... It's related to Magic the Gathering cards. In the world of Magic the Gathering, it's known as altering, where you would take...
yeah, I have a friend who does that. Yeah.
Right, so
yeah.
you're roughly familiar with it then. You basically take a stock Magic the Gathering card and you paint new artwork over the front face of it. And this is something that, if you do it in a careful way, doesn't even necessarily affect how much the card can be played in tournaments. It certainly can affect that, but there are... things you can do to minimize it. And so as a part of that, my miniature painting background, being good at keeping paint very flat, keeping paint very thin, painting accurately at a very small size, I kind of excelled in that, which is why I ended up doing it for so long and eventually kind of started to think about it being a job.
That's amazing.
And so you say that you have a friend who does it. Do you happen to know their artist name? I don't mind if you want to give them a quick plug.
I don't think he posts online or advertises online.
Right.
I just know he's done it for friends, and he's posted on his Facebook page and shown me a lot of the stuff he's done. And it's better than I can do. I'll say that much. It looks pretty great.
I mean, it's a very different thing painting on a flat surface. That was something I learned very quickly, both going into it and coming back to miniature painting. It feels very different, and the paint behaves very differently when you're laying it down on a flat surface. So it's interesting that there isn't. You would expect there maybe to be a bit more crossover there, more miniature painters painting on Magic cards, because the two hobbies certainly overlap a lot, but it's not necessarily the case. Anyway, I do have another question for you. I don't want to go on for too long. So, and this one is maybe verging a little bit on a bit more of an emotive question, I suppose. In a world where Reddit has a reputation for maybe being one of the nastier or meaner parts of the social media landscape, what is it, or why is it, in your opinion, that the Battletech subreddit specifically is so welcoming, so friendly, and so inclusive? What is it that contributes to that, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of different factors. Of course, we have the commonality of we are there because we're interested in this, 35-year-old game that, let's be honest, doesn't have the biggest community. So it's if you're active enough, everyone who's active to a certain point starts recognizing the same names online because, you know, Discord, Facebook, the forums, and Reddit, you'll see. I think that's the same guy, and half the time you'll be right. But then it's also it's there's no competitive scene that's worldwide, and I enjoy competitive games, but competitive games that you play with a friend breed a completely different attitude than competitive games that like you're meeting someone you've never met and playing a game, and then you're going to go online to plan out like I'm going to kick butt at this tournament, you know. And I think that kind of keeps a certain type of player. You know, we all know that guy. Like BattleTech definitely has those guys.
Yeah, of
But
course.
they go to the local club, and the local club is, well, hey, dude, chill. We'll, you know, welcome to the game. Let's play nice, and you know, if you're too abrasive, the community just kind of passively goes, it's not fun to play with you. And
Yeah.
then another factor, and perhaps one of the biggest, all of the big in-universe stuff, all the like gameplay rules, the youngest controversial thing is still, I think, 10 years old.
Right.
So the arguments are old, and people don't feel the need to rehash them. Now
Right,
they just
they've kind of
go,
been had
well,
already.
yeah, I like it's no secret a lot of players still love the Succession War era, and they think the clans was the worst thing that ever happened. And that happened 2 years into the BattleTech timeline
Right.
in real world. And I think 2 years. Someone's probably going to be in your comments correcting me there.
So in
And
like the mid to late 80s.
yeah, it was very much. I mean, it was in full swing by the 90s, and the people who don't like the clans, they don't like them. That's okay. The people who love them, love them. That's okay. Where the community as general is just, hey, if that's what you like, play what you like. And
Right.
that's the approach they've taken to everything now. So it's just, there's no reason to argue.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's perhaps, and again, I say this purely because I know people will be coming to my channel having watched my alternatives to GW video and my, you know, is the grass greener in Battletech video. And I think that's, you know, perhaps another comparison that could be made with 40k is that because the lore is kind of always held in stasis and there's often a lot of frustration from the player base about that, and because the game on a mechanical level is constantly changing, which is also very frustrating, it's almost like those arguments get refreshed regularly. You know, it's in 8th edition there was an argument about Space Marines being the best faction, and in 9th edition at the start of the edition there was another argument about Space Marines being the best faction, and back in 7th edition there was definitely going to be an argument about Space Marines being the best faction, and you know, and it happens all the time. And I think a lot of that is because whilst the game mechanically refreshes constantly, the universe moves at a snail's pace, and so those two things kind of sit at odds to each other and potentially create a bit of frustration for players. Battletech's very different to that, isn't it? Battletech is all about evolution and moving on and forward in the storyline.
Yeah, they so and Catalyst doesn't just move forward. They have gone back, and here is an area that we didn't flesh out enough, and that's due to the complex history of the Battletech license. And so they've gone back and said, well, we have really good stories to tell in this era, and so they make sure to fill in some spots. But yeah, they've been moving the storyline forward, and in universe, when the products first came out, it was 3025, and now the current lore just came out. We're at 3150, and it's really like it's continuing on, and that time period is almost unabated. There's something in almost every year.
Yeah,
that someone can dive deep on.
And that's interesting because comparative to 40k, Battletech is almost microcosmic. It's so much smaller. Yeah, Catalyst and everyone that's kind of contributed to writing for Battletech seems to be very good at, despite the fact that they're working in a comparatively small space compared to other sci-fi genres, keeping things feeling very busy, having simultaneous events going on in different areas, and having them reference each other, and just keeping a lot of flow and a lot of movement in that story. Despite the fact that they are essentially dealing with both a smaller geographical area in space and also just a single faction, as it were, in when you talk about it in comparative terms to 40k.
Yeah, although so I love me some Douglas Adams, and so I'll pull his Space is Big, like really big,
really big, yeah.
And so Battletech. If you look at the map, it's such a small area, but there's so much that they've detailed, and it's this huge zone. When you start getting into wait a minute, I don't know how, I've never counted the stars. I know there are people who have, because there's databases of every single colony, and every single one has some lore in it.
Right. But that's the thing, just going back to that comment I made. I guess the point is not necessarily that Battletech is overly busy as such. It's more that 40k tends to, again, be deliberately very slow, and they tend to sort of have this way of story writing in the Warhammer universe where, despite the fact that the human race is an entire species with loads of different factions, they don't really apply that same sort of depth to any of the other races.
Well, and I've read only a few novels. I've read a couple of the Horse Heresy ones, and I've looked at the wikis a little bit. I never got into the lore quite as much, but one thing I noticed, so they'll have a really good detailed story on one planet, and then you probably never hear of that planet again.
Right. And it was really interesting to me hearing things re-referenced over and over again in Battletech lore. For example, the planet Hall, where the third book of the Grey Death trilogy is set. But then there's another book that I've just finished. I'll have to check my Audible to remind me of the name of it. But that's also set on the planet Hall, and Embers of War. And you're going, even though those two books are set years and years apart, you're going back and looking at what's changed on that same world.
Yeah, and then they do that for so many places, so it gets. I know history majors who enjoy researching Battletech.
I can imagine, If you're a history buff, I can see that it would be attractive. But anyway, again, let's not mire down. I know we've both got more questions, so hit me with your next one. Yeah. I'm all ears.
All right, so this is a question I ask every single painter I've met who's I've seen their work, and I go, wow, that's really good. Because when I first started painting, I started by watching a ton of videos and going, holy crud, I'll never be that good. and so that question is actually, what was your first mini? Do you have it or pictures of it? And since you're a traditional painter, what about your first attempt at doing a magic card?
Okay, so first of all, the short answer is not really. My first magic card that I painted on, I could probably track down a bad picture of. I think there might be one on my Facebook. So if I can find that, I will put it up on the video and it will appear somewhere on the screen while we're talking about this. But the truth is, there's a couple of layers to it. I had a fairly nomadic upbringing, to be honest. We moved around a lot when I was younger. And so, stuff gets lost. Stuff gets given away, stuff gets sold because you're moving and you want to downsize. And, my first miniature will have been a beaky space marine. I still it's fuzzy because I'm in my late 30s now, and this was when I was like 5 or 6 years old. But I'm pretty sure it was a beaky space marine, and it probably got painted over several more times and was probably part of several different armies in the course of its life, and eventually it probably just ended up crunched up in a bits box and then, you know, from there thrown in the bin. The first Magic card I ever painted on was for someone else, so I don't own it. It wasn't a commission, it was just for someone else. And so I don't own it. And so I think, you know, there's two things to this. Is one, commission painting certainly teaches you to not get too attached to the object itself, because you're in, you know, 90% of the miniatures I paint I don't get to keep. And most of the Magic cards that I painted when I was doing traditional painting I didn't get to keep. And that teaches you to learn not to get too attached to them. And being someone who moved around a lot when I was younger, you also learn not to get too attached to things that way. You know, that's part of your upbringing, that, you know, almost as a self-defense mechanism, I guess, you kind of try not to rely on permanence too much.
Well, and it's there's certain things I've bought, and I've told my wife, if we're getting this, like, it's not coming with us if we move, or like, I'm willing to get that as long as we're never moving. Like, I don't want to move that.
If we move house, we're having a new piano delivered.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, no, I get it. And so, you know, what I've learned through that experience is to focus more and to derive my joy and my reward from the process, not the outcome. So it's an interesting question, because I think for a lot of people it would maybe be quite sad that they don't have even a photo of those firsts. But for me, it's a valuable life lesson in that I've turned that into a positive. You know, that's actually become a tool in my arsenal, as it were, to learn to love the process more than the outcome. And that can be really useful for content creation as well, where, you know, sometimes there'll be something I've got to do for a video and I've just got to paint like a leg of a space marine, and I cannot tell you how many fucking space marine legs I've painted in my life. Just to demonstrate a technique on, because it's, you know, that's the most ubiquitous miniature in my junk box. That's what I've got loads of, and I only need to paint a small area just to demonstrate this technique. There's no point in painting a full miniature, otherwise it has to be a full-length tutorial video, and that's not always what you're trying to make. And being able to appreciate the process really helps with stuff like that. It really helps just being able to kind of shrink down your expectations and do smaller things. So, you know, I consider it a positive, even if it is perhaps a little bit sad for some people.
Well, I don't know. So painting is agony for me. I heard a talk a long time ago about first order fun that's fun to do, and you want to go and do it again. And then there's second order fun. It's not fun to do, but later you go, oh, that was the experience you retell.
Yeah.
And I find painting to be more in the second order fun. It's the whole process for me is agony, and then when I'm done, I go, oh, hey, that's not too bad. I kind of like that, and that's the motivation I get to. All right, I'll try to paint another mini. Like, I'm terrible at it. But
it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, there's certain aspects of fun that you have to open yourself up to. You have to be willing to experience the good qualities of that process in order to get the fun out of it. And mini painting can be a bit difficult in that way, because not everybody likes painstakingly hunching over something and doing very high concentration, fine manual work to it.
Well, and I find it, for me, it's the getting the mental image of what I want is problem one. So like, if I see a picture, I'm like, okay, I want to recreate that picture. That will be motivation for me. But then I'm an average painter. I'll actually send you my first and one of my pieces I'm actually proud of.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I can put them up on screen while we're talking. So
Yeah, and because my first mini was this little cowboy that's terrible, but I save it because right next to it is that special edition Noise Marine that I painted a few months to a year later, and the growth I did is so amazing that that is a skill I've started to learn. I'm proud of being able to do that, and that's what pushes me to like, yeah, I'm going to try to recreate that because I may not be able to now, but later, sometime in the future, I might be able to recreate that really cool looking image that I see.
And that's another one of those sort of interesting life lessons from miniature painting. You know, there are a few hobbies that can teach you better than miniature painting. The value of the journey, you know, the value of just dedicating yourself to something and continuing to practice it and hone your craft.
Yeah, and this one is the one that really personal to me is the like I can regurgitate a lot of information because for probably 6 months I did nothing but watch YouTube videos and I never picked up a brush because I wanted to learn the theory and I got to know how to do it before I start. And
right, yeah,
my first mini is still ugly, like because watching videos does not translate to actually brush to mini learning.
Yeah, of
like
course,
you learn so much more trying and failing. It's great.
There are the thing is, you know, I teach mini painting as part of my job, and I often try to break down, you know, what are the qualities that make up a mini painter, or what are the qualities that pertain to getting good at mini painting. And the thing that I realize is, you know, that there is so much more to it than you would maybe realize on the surface. There is passive information, you know, the stuff that is very easy to absorb and you just have to keep it at the back of your mind, but you're not actively thinking about it. Things like color theory would fall into that sphere, you know, having a basic understanding that if this is grass green, then bright red is going to be a good complementary to it, that kind of thing.
Right.
Those things kind of sit at the back of your head. They're not what I would call active information or active learning. They're passive. But then at the same time, you have the active things, you know, like technique. Technique is something that once you've had it explained to you, it will be actively at the front of your mind. You'll be thinking about how to achieve that technique. Then you have muscle memory, you know, and then you have fine motor control, which is completely different to muscle memory. Because again, muscle memory is passive. You don't have to think about it to do it. Fine motor control is active. You have to concentrate to do it, you know. And so there's not only is there this broad range of skills pertinent to becoming a good mini painter, but there are two different sides to it as well in the active skills and the passive skills. And I find that a lot of teaching tends to revolve around developing the active skills, not the passive skills, whereas I really focus on the passive skills because they're the ones that take all the stress out of it. So I have another question. I have another one, and I think this one's probably we're going to have to try not to spend too long on it because I think if we do, we might dig ourselves into a hole. We might get in trouble with the community. So I want to know two things. If there's one mech in all of Battletech that you could own in real life, an actual version of, which would it be? And similarly, which mech would you delete from history and never speak of again?
Oh my, that last one's asking me to be pilloried. Okay, so I think first mech is the one I'd like to have is kind of easy because in a way it's a cheater question or a cheater answer. I'm assuming that I would also have the ability to, you know, maintain it and upkeep. And so I would have to go with the Phoenix Hawk Lamb, although I would be content with any of the Lamb. For people who aren't familiar, Lamb stands for Land Air Mech. And they're really cool. A lot of players don't like them.
Wait a minute. Is this like a transformer?
Yeah. So they're this comes from Battletech's history. When it first came, they licensed designs from Macross, and so the fighters that transform into mechs are a thing in Battletech, and they've ensured that there's rules for them, even though they try to put them to the side. And please stop bringing these up. So it can walk around, and any mech is way more than what a modern tank can do. So
Sure.
any mech is great, and then it can fly, so I can go anywhere in the world. And like those two things make an awesome combination. So I'll show you pictures of the current version of the Phoenix Hawk Lamb, but like the original ones were the actual Veritech fighters from Robotech.
Wow, wow. Now, I know you sent me some links to some pictures, so I will be able to, again, put pictures up over the video. And I have to say, the Lamb is really interesting. When I first looked at it, I was just like, why has it got, like, aerodynamic shit? Is it a transformer? Does it turn into a plane? Because I've obviously not heard anything about this in the, like, 3 weeks that I've been interested in Battletech.
Yeah, well, and they are one of the most complex units to learn, because you have to know how to play with mechs. You have to know how to play with aerospace fighters.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know how to play with they're called wing and ground effect vehicles.
Okay.
And then you have to have the optional rule book for like complicated turn mode.
Oh,
so
fun.
They are individually the most complex unit to learn and play, and they perform worse than a battle mech ton for ton, worse than an aerospace fighter ton for ton. But
Amazing.
if you're playing a narrative campaign, like, yeah, you just send them to the back lines where they aren't facing any resistance, because they can fly anywhere.
And let me guess, all those problems that you just listed with them, I bet they're exactly the things you like about them, aren't they?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I find a love in using things that people don't know how to use well, and defending the trash of the system. Like, it's not fair to call it trash. Everything has its place, but some are so goofy and silly and hard to use.
So go on. Sorry, finish.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, good point, good moment to segue. Speaking of trash, what about your one?
Yes,
that you?
Well, that is actually what I was going to say too. So, I think like I said, every mech has its lover. Someone will hate whatever I mention, but there's a mech called the Yeoman.
I'm looking at it right now, and I wish I wasn't.
It's so goofy and silly looking, and it's always voted the ugliest mech. And I think if I say that one, that'll be the one that gets me least likely to be pilloried.
Okay. So you're trying to be kind to the community. The people watching this when it goes out, they're going to be able to see what we're talking about. I guess down in the comments below, folks, if you agree, because it's a thing.
I sent you the model. I'll have to send you the line art too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
A lot of memes, and it's so goofy. It's a giant box with legs. It looks like a boom box almost.
Right, look, I'll be completely honest. I'm the new kid around here, okay? I don't feel like I've earned my stripes in the Battletech community, so I'm not going to go slagging off any mech. They're all fine as far as I'm concerned. All I'll say is that I have some opinions on that Yeoman, and I'm going to do the nice thing and keep them to myself, because they mostly involve swear words.
Yeah,
do you want to shoot with your next question?
Yeah. So this may be another difference, since you are a commission painter. But how do you decide not to go all out on a paint job? Or asking another way, when you're painting for yourself, how do you say to yourself, it's okay. Like, just I know I could do way better than what this is, but this is fine, and just you set it down and you leave it.
So there are really two very distinctly different answers to this question, and I'm glad that you said when painting for yourself, because it's a very different answer to when painting for a client. When you're painting for a client, it's actually really simple, because they tell you what standard they want it painted to when they order the job, right? You sort of tell them a price based on what they want, but it's them that decides what you're going to do. So it's really easy with commissions, because you're just doing as you're told. You You paint it until it looks like you promised it was going to look like in the consultation with the client, and you don't stop until you hit that point. Painting for yourself is a lot more difficult, because there are different outcomes, aren't there? There are different things that we want from painting a miniature. Sometimes when we're painting a miniature, we're painting just to relax, and the point to stop then is the point that it stops being relaxing, right? It's kind of obvious, but other times, you know, maybe we've got to get 1,000 points of Warhammer 40k ready for the weekend, and it's like Thursday, and we've got a game on Saturday, which for me would be a nightmare scenario. I actually was in that scenario recently, and I fell way short of the mark. You know, and at that point, the point that we're stopping is like, what is the minimum I can do to this that doesn't look atrocious? And then other times, you know, we're painting because we're trying to push ourselves, and we want to see what we can do. And interestingly, that was you've probably seen a photograph of this Infinity miniature that I painted recently. Interestingly enough, that was an example with that. It was supposed to be a warm-up piece. It was supposed to be something I was working on between other pieces. And I ended up just staying and doing overtime on it because I was trying to push myself with it. I was trying to see how close I could get to Infinity's very unique presentation style. So I guess the thing is with personal pieces is having a plan is probably the most reliable way to look at it. You know, go into that piece knowing what you want to get out of it. And the point to stop is once you've achieved that. If you achieve that and continue painting for 3 or 4 hours, you could be achieving something else. And so, you know, I like to look at it as, you know, in 2021, none of us have the luxury of having that much excess time anymore. The world just doesn't work that way. We don't have as much leisure time as we perhaps once had. And so I think ticking boxes and moving on to the next one is far more important than lingering on something that you're not really getting anything out of. That's my doorbell. My doorbell loves to go when I'm recording.
I'll apologize in advance in case my daughter starts making noise. That's my equivalent.
No, it's always the way, isn't it? When you do things that are kind of quote unquote live in some way or another, there's always going to be something that happens that you can't possibly have planned for. Right. So my question 4, we're in the back half of this now. You seem to me, we've spent probably a week or so at this point socializing together.
How about that?
You seem to me to be a very enthusiastic wargamer. You seem to, you know, to be very invested. Is Battletech your only poison, or are there other games out there that appeal to you as well?
No, I wouldn't say I game hop, because I tend to collect might be more accurate.
Okay.
I go, oh, that looks interesting, I want to try it. And then, unlike you, who's like, oh, I'm a nomad, I can get rid of stuff. I go, but what if I change my mind? And so I'll like, even if I don't play for a while, I'll keep it so that later I can dust it off and try it again.
Oh, you're one of them hoarders.
Yeah, I try not to go that far. So I've tried 40k, and I have a Dark Angels army that was short-lived. I'm still enjoying it a little bit, but the recent drama has like made me remember why I didn't get into it yet, and so it's one of those like, okay, and it's not fully painted, so playing locally wasn't a thing right now anyway. Of course, there's the virus going on. But then I like Blood Bowl. I love that it's it's just one small team, and the community says, you know what, we're going to do what we want. We create all sorts of teams, and that's really fun. I have some friends who are real historical war gamers. I met them through the love of Battletech, but they play bolt action as well. And so I have a U.S. Marine Corps army for bolt action, and that's just for my war games. And I have a bunch of other board games and and other style games that I just enjoy playing, and I love doing RPGs and stuff as well.
So you are just as kind of busy and invested in the wargaming hobby as a whole as you are in BattleTech specifically.
Yeah, although Battletech is kind of my return to center. Every time I'll try a different game, back to Battletech. Maybe I'll interact with Battletech a slightly different way than I did in the past, because this one game had something I really like. I was not a fan of Alpha Strike.
Right.
I'll be honest. It didn't have the complexity I wanted.
And I think that's something I'm learning, is that's a draw for a lot of Battletech players.
Yeah, well, and then I played Bolt Action and I played 40K, and moving all of those models now makes me go, well, but the Battletech Alpha Strike is a little bit more detailed than them. It's like people don't die in one hit. And then I get that let's move a ton of models, and so slightly more granular than those games while still having a high model count. Let's just quickly move, as long as you aren't playing that tournament like, oh no, did you move 0.1 of an inch, you know? Playing a really fast and loose game of Alpha Strike now is actually really fun. But that's something I only got after playing Bolt Action and 40K. And
that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is, you know, for not for everyone is the hobby cyclical. You know, for a lot of people, the hobby is just Warhammer 40K or is just Battletech or, you know, whatever. And I think maybe one of the biggest advantages of that cycle of dipping in and out of the main one and coming back to it every few years, is that every time you go and concentrate on something else, you come back to the main thing with a slightly altered perception of it, and that maybe changes your approach, or maybe it gives you some sort of breakthrough in terms of how you play, or, you know, it can really do a lot for your growth and your enjoyment of the game. And interestingly, something I never thought I would say, because 40K was always my home base. You know, much like you, I had a game that I always returned to after branching out to check other things out. And interestingly, normally I would cycle away from 40K just by getting kind of bored of it, because I'd only really play with the same people. And that's not to say that it was necessarily a super small group. I'd usually go to the local club to play, so I still had a pool of opponents, you know, but it just eventually get a bit like, it's just all a bit samey, I'm kind of done with this. This time that I've walked away from 40K is the first time I've ever walked away from 40K on purpose, not just petered out from it. And I think it's kind of the opposite. It's that all of these things that 40K has taught me that I love, that are great, I can find them elsewhere without the things I don't like.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's kind of whether you play lots of other games but have a home base, or whether you only have a home base and have maybe never looked out at other games, there's always some development and some change in you as a gamer going on there. And I think that's a really interesting thing about being one of the more invested gamers that's into lots of stuff, is that you get a lot of those opportunities to grow from being exposed to all these different games.
Yeah. Well, it's just sometimes a new game is just a fresher breath of air, and even if you don't like it or something, it gives you a new perspective. If you give it an honest chance, it gives you a new perspective. And if you don't like it, you might like, oh, this one piece. I enjoyed that, and I want to find other things.
Yeah, I want to be able to incorporate that experience into my other gaming experiences, for sure. So, you have a question for?
Yeah. So, what were some of your painting plateaus, and how did you get past them?
Okay, so in the notes, I've only put one down here, and the reason I'm only going to do one is because, as I'm sure you can tell, I tend to like to go into detail when I talk about things. I'm not the most superficial conversationalist, so I'm just gonna do one, and it's the one that I talked to you about in the show notes. Yeah. one of the biggest plateaus for me, one of the biggest problems I had was what I call shrinking of painting. I spent 10 years maybe learning traditional painting, getting good at traditional painting. And I got pretty good at it, and I learned to do a lot of advanced stuff that I never had previously known how to do on miniatures. And then I come back to miniature painting, and all of a sudden I'm trying to replicate these large-scale techniques that I've done on something even smaller. You know, whereas a magic card is 2.5 by 3.5 inches, 2.5 by 3.5 inches in a miniature, that's a huge amount of space. You'd never get that amount of uninterrupted space on a miniature. You know, even something like a Thunderhawk gunship from Forge World, which is like this big, you know, it doesn't have 2.5 by 3.5 inches of uncluttered space for you to work in anywhere on it. So you suddenly find that you have to learn to shrink your painting. Everything that you know how to do, you have to relearn how to do it smaller. And there were certainly a couple of years when I first got back into mini painting of really struggling with that. And one of the big breakthroughs, one of the things that really changed it for me, I only figured this out last year, but it was all about this little guy. It was all about, very specifically, this little guy. And
you're a brush licker.
Yeah, I am. Again, it's an old school thing. No one used to tell you off for it in the 80s and 90s, so I never got told off for it when I was younger.
I don't judge. I didn't know, and I don't understand it. I keep my brush far away from my mouth.
I mean, I'm the same with a pen. If I've got a pen in my hand for too long, it ends up in my mouth. It's just how I am.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to this specific brush, and I say this specific brush is in this brand and size. I kind of threw.
What brand and size is it?
So this is a Rosemary & Co. Series 33. It's a sable brush, and it's a tapered round, and it's a size 3, which is perhaps the thing that amazes people the most. Miniature wargaming companies, hobby companies, really like this idea of selling us these 0, 00, 000 brushes that are essential for miniature painting. And there's this wisdom is probably a better way to put it, peddled around by these people, that type of brush is essential for painting small detail. And what I realized is not only is it not essential, it actually hinders you. It's actually far worse. Because the problem with those tiny little brushes is, you know, maybe something like a 000, yeah, like nothing is really going to get much finer than that because it's got like 4 fucking hairs in the ferrule. but because it's only got like 4 hairs in the ferrule, it doesn't hold on to any moisture. It can't retain any fluidity to the paint. So you might get one touch with that brush that's perfect. And then as soon as you try and touch again, the brush is dry. So you can't run a line with it. You can't, you know, black line an eyeball with it. You can't black line in between fingers with it. This kind of thing. And what I realised is that to a certain point, that you hit a point of diminishing returns where shrinking the brush doesn't actually help you. The very point of this brush is just as fine as the point of that 000. And the reason the point is just as fine is because every single brush, they all end in a guide hair. They all have one hair that's longer than all the others. That's how they're made. That guide hair is what gives them a centre point to run onto to create that tapered cone. And so the difference is not in the size of the point that's available to you, the fineness that you can achieve with the brush. You can achieve the same fineness with a size 3 as you can with a 000. And again, there's a point of diminishing returns going up as well. When you get to like a size 4, size 5, size 6, they start to become so chunky, the guide hair kind of flattens off and the point of the brush becomes a lot more round. But the size 3 for me is where I found that sweet spot, where the fineness was still there, but it holds so much more liquid in the belly. It's got all that extra meat in the middle to hold onto liquid. And so you can run these long lines with it. You can, create these intricate patterns with it. You can do these free-handed pieces, and you only have to stop and dip your brush once or twice during the whole process. It's incredible. And in fact, the vast majority of the time when I paint with this thing, if you look at one of my painting tissues, the vast majority of my painting tissues is me wiping my brush off because it's got too much liquid in it, because I actually need it drier to work with. And so this realization that these tiny little brushes that my whole life I'd been told I needed for painting miniatures, they were what was holding me back. And suddenly I started using this bigger brush, and I'm painting smaller and finer. I'm able to do these tiny little micro scratches and all this outlining and this edge highlighting. And suddenly I've unlocked all these skills. I could do them all along. I just didn't have the right tool. And that was an incredible moment to me, because I've always had it kind of drilled into me to not blame the tool. The problem is that you're not working hard enough. You need to get better. You need to do more. And there it was. Like I knew how to do it. I had the skill. I had the ability the whole time. I was just trying to channel that ability through the wrong tool, and the tool couldn't translate it to the miniature for me. And overcoming that plateau was an incredibly freeing moment for me as a miniature painter. It really changed the landscape of miniature painting for me.
That's awesome. I'll have to, I have some bigger brushes, but I don't think they have a guide hair. Although I think most of my brushes are synthetic, and that might be why. But I know there's also a stylistic difference between some brushes have this really prominent guide hair and some don't.
Yeah, yeah. So you tend to have tapered rounds and rounds. That's the difference. And a tapered round usually has to have a guide hair in order to get that teardrop shape, because it's the point is deliberately supposed to be thinner than the belly. And so it needs the guide hair to create that shape, because those hairs need something to cling to as they thin out. Whereas normally just a round won't necessarily be constructed that way. But the problem is that art companies don't agree on anything, and this is where it becomes an issue. The sizes don't mean anything. They literally mean nothing. My size 3, Rosemary & Co., is the same as a size 1 Broken Toad and a size 2 from Monument. There's no consistency. Rosemary just call this a round, even though it's a tapered round. It's not a round. If you buy rounds from other companies, they have a different shape to this. They have a completely different profile. It's a tapered round, and some companies will call it a tapered round, but some companies will just call it a round. Rosemary & Co. just call it a round. And this is the problem, is that none of it's standardized. It's all confusing as shit, and no one really knows until they try. And that's what makes it so easy for these snake oil salespeople to peddle stuff that doesn't help you, but puts money in the till, right? And that's a bit of a personal quest of mine. I kind of have a bit of a problem with that. There's a lot of snake oil peddlers in the hobby industry. And it's something that I've kind of always had a bit of a bee in my bonnet about. I kind of quest against it a little bit. But that's definitely a separate rant.
Well, and there's, who's it? I don't watch him much. I think it was Sam Lenz who just, he uses just the random crap brushes from a hobby store.
And he paints with huge brushes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I think the thing with Sam is that a lot of the technique that he does is it's deliberately very rough, and Sam has, when he needs to work fine, he has this superhuman ability to be able to do the finest touches, far finer than most. I can't think of another painter who has this ability that Sam has. And so even with a huge chunky brush, Sam could take this 1-inch dusting brush and paint a fucking eyeball with it, because he'll find a way to locate whichever hair it is on it that's the one that sticks out the furthest, and he'll put a glob of paint on the end of that hair, and only that one hair will touch the area. But we don't all have Sam's control, and when we don't all have Sam's control and his ability, we need solutions that work for most people. And what works for most people is stuff like stop trying to use tiny fucking brushes for detail. Well,
and I think with painting, everyone has a I don't like calling it survivorship bias, but if I say that phrase, then everyone knows exactly what I mean. Where it's like, this is the method that worked for me, and therefore this is going to be the and painting more than anything else, I think, is such a personal journey.
It is, yeah. Which is exactly
So,
why I focus so much more on what I called earlier those passive skills. Because
yeah.
the active skills, you won't hold your brush like I do. You won't angle your brush to your miniature like I do. I can try and pass those skills on, and I do sometimes in videos. I try to show people how I do it in the hope that they can figure out how it works for them by watching how I do it. But if someone's actually paying me for lessons, they're not going to get active skill training generally. They're almost always going to get passive skill training because that's what's actually definitely going to help them.
That definitely makes sense.
So my final question, I think it's about time.
Yeah.
And I think this would be a nice positive one to end my list on. So if you could sum up why it is that you think everyone who loves war games should at least give Battletech a look, what would you say? What is it about Battletech that everyone should at least check it out?
All right. Well, so I almost think that's a little narrow because I don't think just wargamers should check it out.
Okay.
Battletech has something for everyone. You can play an RPG in it. You can do small, detailed squad combat. You can have a really fast-playing company or larger scale game. You like space battles? There's rules for that. You want grand strategy? There's rules for that. There's Battletech. Our joke motto in the community is there are rules for that, and
Yeah.
all of this is supported with over 35 years of lore. All of the factions are shades of gray. It's not 40K level where everyone is evil and you just choose which evil faction you like. It's rather every faction has something good about them and something bad about them, and you can choose which parts you decide to focus on. And
it's interesting, isn't it? Possibly the most ostensibly good characters within the Battletech universe are mercenaries, because at least they have the most honest out there motivations of everyone.
I mean, so for a certain perspective, that is definitely true, and I could easily support that argument, and I can easily go like Kurita. There are great noble samurais who follow the way of the warrior, honorably fighting for their master and trying to. Some of my favorite early novels are about the division between the duty to his country and the duty to this friendship he's formed over years of working with a mercenary scum who only cares about money. All the while, the mercenary is actually showing he doesn't just care about money. It's a lot more than that to him.
And Battletech's really good at sort of documenting those human journeys of discovery, isn't it? It's kind of a thing it likes to do.
For sure. And because of that, you can also spin it that this heartless faction drove this man to death and, make that faction as the most evil World War II era stereotype you want to, because if you look at it from the perception of other factions, you could paint it that black and white if you wanted to. But any faction, you go into depth and there's this great shades of gray political intrigue and all of that warfare. And as we talked about, that history. But, and this is an amazing part, they provide just enough detail that you know what's going on in the broader scheme of things.
Yeah.
But there's so many planets that, well, no one knows what this planet is doing for this 5-year stretch.
Yeah.
So you could have a 5-year campaign on that planet and just slot your thing right in there. 10 mercenary companies helped take out this planet as part of some invasion. But you know what? It doesn't say what mercenary company it was. So maybe it was one of yours.
Yeah. And that's the great thing, isn't it? Is there's so much established canon that you can fit your games around, but there's also so many deliberate gaps placed for you to squeeze your games into as well, like places that you can slot your stuff in wherever you want. And I think it's interesting that you say not just wargamers should check out Battletech, because I think that is perhaps one of the best draws of Battletech is the fact that it has stuff that appeals to people that are interested in history, people that are interested in specifically military history. It has things for people interested in political intrigue and drama. You know, if you're a fan of Agatha Christie, you'll probably find some of the books might appeal to you. It has things for fans of space opera. It has things for fans of board games, things for fans of role-playing games, things for fans of cartoons, of war games. There's literally, as you say, something for almost everyone. If you're some kind of nerd, Battletech probably has something that will appeal to you. And I think that's quite unique for a wargaming franchise. I can't think of any other that even comes close to that.
Yeah, well, and I'm pretty sure I know why this is, because so when when a new player comes to us and goes like, "What books do I need to buy?" We can't just say, "Buy this book and you're good." It's well, how do you want to engage in the universe? Because for a lot of people, the average, I just want to play a war game, then Alpha Strike Commander's Edition or Battle Mech Manual. That'll do mech on mech combat in one of the two scales that you're interested in, and I'm willing to bet the vast majority of people never expand beyond that for rules. But then you have the RPG players. Then you have the people who want to do the mercenary simulator where you have detailed refit and repair and all of these things. And if you just show how many ways there are to interact in Battletech, it overwhelms the new person. And so most companies go, well, no, there's just one way. And then like 40K is starting to do or Games Workshop starting to do well, okay, so we have Kill Team, and we have 40K, and we have I forget the large scale army name. For
40K.
Yeah.
It doesn't really get played much, but I think it's called like Armageddon or Apocalypse or something like that.
Yeah,
it's not super popular though.
And then they have I've seen them start to come out with those board games that are like, okay, here's a different way to engage in the series, but they're like one-offs. Whereas Catalyst will do, this is until we have something better than it.
Yeah,
we are going to keep. Yeah, like we're gonna keep selling the PDFs or reprinting the books because people are enjoying it, and so. There was something that was like Alpha Strike before Alpha Strike, and it evolved. And for the people who still love that, like they can, it's essentially the Alpha Strike rules, but instead of a single mech, it's every token represented 4 mechs.
Like, right, okay.
There are minor differences, but it got a different tone, and I think they're still planning to reprint those rules somewhere.
I mean, I have to say, not even just for a war game, but just thinking about just products that I've interacted with in general, I can't think of anything that has better long-term dedicated support than Battletech. I literally can't name anything. Like, could you imagine, I don't know, let's talk about something that came out around a similar sort of time. Let's talk about, say, the NES console. Can you imagine if Nintendo was still releasing NES games today? Like, it would just never happen. There are third parties that are certainly still making the odd one, once in a blue moon.
I do love that a lot of Battletech is unchanging, but one of my campaigns, my crusade, is there is a myth that Battletech has never changed since the 80s. And I think the fairer comparison, because it has. They're minor changes. Like the things you love about Battletech, if you played it in the 80s, are still here in the modern day. But like a few rules have changed. One of the biggest things, the very first edition of Battletech, when it was called Battle Droids, that almost no one played. That's not fair. Is there were no heat sinks inside the engine. Every single heat sink a mech had was external. And Battletech 2nd Edition, the very first edition labeled Battletech, that changed. And then later the Battletech, it's the Battletech Master Rules, and then the Battletech Compendium. Those came out at different times, and those made little minor alterations. And then Total Warfare is the most recent rule set, which made, again, some more minor alterations, but like they add up over time. And now that came out in, I can't even remember the year. I want to say 2011 or so, somewhere around there. And that one to now is still a decade, and so it's still a lot of support. But while they produce errata for Total Warfare, if you have your rule set from the Compendium or the Battletech Master Rules, like there's enough changes, you need a new rule book, kind of like the new edition of 40K. It just the edition changes between Battletech. A, they don't tend to get labeled edition changes. B, they're so rare.
Yeah.
And then C, it's usually like we changed a couple things that we found egregiously out of balance or gameable.
But the interesting thing is that the core mechanics often stay pretty much identical. And the changes do tend to just be addressing balance and fairness.
Yeah, very much so.
It's a really interesting way to look at a game, and I guess a lot of other games don't have the luxury of being old enough to be able to do that, right? So, you know, you can't really compare it to anyone else because the majority of games just haven't existed long enough for that to be a thing, and the only one you can compare it to is Warhammer, unfortunately, which is probably the worst example out there of the opposite problem, of it just changes too much, and that is exactly what frustrates a lot of its players. And it seems to be accelerating, you know, it seems to be actually doing that more frequently as time goes on. So you
also see it in the RPG space, where
you do, Dungeons and Dragons has definitely done it.
Yeah, D&D, like it's changed somewhat, but I play Earth Dawn as well. That's an old FASA property, and the differences between Earth Dawn version 1 and Earth Dawn 4th edition, which is the current one, are enough that, I mean, there are differences, don't get me wrong, but I am running campaigns using rules written for the 1st edition Earth Dawn without changing stuff. Like, it's just, here's an enemy stat block. Okay, I'll use that. and it works because the differences that exist are not so gigantic that that they require massive overhauls.
For sure, yeah. And it's incredibly refreshing to me as someone who, you know, most of my exposure has been to Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons, which are both fairly rapidly changing, you know, comparative to other offerings. So I guess it's time to do it. It's last question, and it's all yours. This will be bringing us to our end.
Yeah, and it's not quite as uplifting, but I'm hoping your answer makes it uplifting. So I regularly struggle with motivation. I have unfinished projects, all that kind of stuff. So do you struggle with motivation, and if so, how do you deal with it?
Something I speak about quite openly is that I do suffer from a behavioural condition. I have ADHD, and that means things like project management and motivation are particularly difficult things for me. So the truth is that I constantly struggle with those. They're major recurring problems in my life, those specific things. And the truth is, I don't always get past it. Sometimes it will beat me down into a slump of depression, you know. But I do have some weapons to fight against it, and I'm pretty happy to say that most of the time they work. The main way I think that you beat... Excuse me, I drank my coffee a little bit too fast. The main way that I think you beat a lack of motivation is flexibility, is not gluing yourself into, I have to do this on this day, and then the next day I have to achieve exactly this, and then the next day I have to achieve exactly this. So to give some context, I used to I used to do my commissions one at a time. So, you know, I've got a commission for this Space Marine Chapter Master. When I finish painting that, I'll then move on to this next commission for Dungeons and Dragons PC character. And then when I finish that commission, I'll move on to this 54mm art piece or whatever. And that can work if every single commission that you have on is super fun and interesting and challenging for you, but that isn't the real world. When you're a commercial artist, you don't get to 100% paint things that you want to paint or that are fun to paint. You have to be earning a wage. You have to be bringing home an income to provide for your dependents and the people that you're, you know, trying to provide for. And that means that you sometimes have to take commissions that aren't things that you find particularly exciting to paint. And as a product of that, you've got to find a way to make that something that you can do. And so what I do now is I'll have 4 or 5 commissions as my active commissions at once, but they'll be in various different stages of completion and there'll be different types of miniature. So for example, if I look, I keep my active commissions over here. So I've got a squad of 6 custodian guard for 40k at the moment that are almost finished. They're very nearly done. I've basically got some black highlighting to do on them and a bit of silver. They're pretty much done. Then I've got 10 Slanesh mounts for Age of Sigmar, which are probably about halfway. And I've still got to do the riders for those as well. So that's, you know, still in fairly early stages. There's still some building to do for that commission. Mm-hmm. Then I've got some Night Lords Raptors for Warhammer 30k, for, you know, Horus Heresy. They're not even finished being built yet. I'm still building them. And then I've got a display piece, Dark Angels Chapter Master, that I'm currently doing as well. And that's probably about 75% done, but it's a display piece, which means everything that I'm painting on it is painstakingly slow and careful work. And so with having all of those commissions active at the same time, I've always got options depending on what my mood is that day. If I need an easy day, I just do some building, I just do some simple base coating, you know, nothing that's strenuous. If I'm feeling super laser focused and I really need to channel that focus into something, I'll pick up that display piece. Or you know, I'll pick up one of the commissions that I've still got a lot of fine work left to do on, and I'll concentrate on some really fine work, some really refined painting. And that really, to me, is the best way that you can overcome a lack of motivation, is by giving yourself options. Because the main thing that will destroy your motivation is feeling like you don't have a choice. It's always going to be the thing that sets you back the most. And if you want to do something about that, you just got to have to give yourself a choice. And it really is as easy as it sounds. You know, you just have more options. If you're a hobbyist painter and you're watching this at home, you know, don't say to yourself, until I finish this lance, I'm not allowed to open my Kickstarter 2. Open your fucking Kickstarter 2. Dig into it. Go nuts. You know, pick up whichever mech in that Kickstarter you like the most and put some paint on it. Because that will re-energize you to do the piece that you've slowed to a halt with, the piece that you're struggling to get finished because you don't really fancy painting it. You'll have that fresh energy going back through you again, and you'll be able to channel that energy into that piece that you were struggling to finish. So that's really my secret sauce top tip for beating a lack of motivation, and that's maybe one of the realest tips I could give, because it's something that is personally a really deep struggle for me, and it's the one thing in my life that makes my job very difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and the easy thing is, we all have a giant pile of shame.
Right. Yeah. I do not know a single hobbyist, and I have never known a single hobbyist that's painted all their miniatures. It's never happened. And I'm pretty sure that if it does happen, it will cause some kind of universal implosion.
Yeah. That's great advice. I like it.
Well, look, Insaniac, this has been amazing. I've had a really, really good time sitting down with you, but we probably should bring this to a close. I think, let's check the timing. I mean, we've ran a little bit over what we planned. We planned for an hour. I'm hoping I can edit it down to be a bit shorter than that, but I don't want to over-edit it, so excuse me. So I think we're probably at the point of the show now where I should say thank you for joining me. It really has been a lot of fun, and
it was my pleasure.
I've
enjoyed this too.
Excellent, excellent. I'm really glad that we decided to do something two-way like this, because it's given me a good chance to get to know you. And it's also just nice for me as a creator to be able to address a new audience and say, hi, this is who I am, this is what I do, I hope you like it. So thank you so much for your questions, for agreeing to come on the show, and for making it so enjoyable. And the other thing that I really wanted to say, and I deliberately left myself a note, is I just wanted to wish you good luck in continuing to make r/Battletech one of the best community destinations for Battletech, because it really genuinely is. When I first started looking into this game, I joined maybe 5 different social media communities built around it, and the subreddit, and to a lesser extent one of the Facebook groups, but that's not what this show's about. This show's about you, so we'll give you the credit here. But that subreddit really is a shining light, an absolute beacon of everything that can be great about a hobby community. It's always supportive, it's always enthusiastic, it's always interactive, it's always engaging, and the people there are just there to have a good time and build each other up, and I love it. I think it's magical that you've managed to create it. And I think you should be really, really proud that you've done so.
Well, thank you. I wish I could take all the credit. The community, when I started moderating it, the community was already really chill, and I think they had been without a moderator for so long that they just expect to deal with their stuff without one too, and keep things like I said, they all know each other, so what's the point in arguing? You know, like,
I love it.
So
I love it.
I look forward to the fresh blood, and I look forward to, you know, there's going to be so many new conversations.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my welcome was absolutely incredible. One of the warmest welcomes I've ever experienced anywhere. And so, you know, if you're watching this and you're one of the many, many people right now that's going, Battletech, that could be interesting, get yourself over to r/Battletech. Check it out. Insaniac does a great job. The community are amazing. So thank you, Insaniac. Thank you so much for being here. I think it's probably time to say goodbye.
All right. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Yeah, and you. Take care. And so there you have it. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. It's just 2 friends who have met on the internet and share a passion for different things, having a chat to each other about that passion. But I hope it served as a great way to introduce myself to the Battletech community, and to introduce people who normally view my channel to Battletech a little more, and explain perhaps why it's something that's really captured my enthusiasm and my imagination. I'm having a great time with this game. It's already become quite popular in my Discord server, and I'm really looking forward to exploring it further. So that's all from me really, folks, at this point, but I would like to remind you to like the video, to share the video if you want to help out, and to remember to sub to the channel and enable notifications if you want to stay up to date on what we're doing here on YouTube. If you'd like to support the channel at all, there are a bunch of links in the description with different ways that you can do that, so feel free to fill your boots. But thank you once again to Insaniac99 for his participation in this video. Thank you to the Battletech community for the amazing warm welcome, and I will see you in the next one, folks. So thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.